in terms of like spirituality versus religion, I always have felt that religions are an attempt to explain what's going on, essentially. So I don't think they're in any way kind of like negative or bad, but they get corrupted by humans, and that's where the problems arise. So for me, I just, again, keep it simple. I just try to keep it really, really simple. For me personally, I don't need a middleman to speak to God or to be in contact with God, because for me, God is readily available whenever I want to speak to him, her, it, whatever you want to say, the universe, etc. And I also believe that I am part of God as well, that God is within me. So I think that, I have a potential, like a divine potential, that it's my job to try to reach.
Welcome, everyone, to the Spiritual Forum. I'm so glad you're here. This podcast is a voice of hope, inspiration, and awakening, and we'll be talking today with my guest, John Loxley, about spirituality and what it is. And for me, spirituality is really the life you're living, and are you living your highest potential, not just from a physical standpoint, but from your soul and your spirit and your complete awakening to the truth of your being, that you are the expression and the essence of God. So we're all on a path towards that. And my guest today is going to help us along that path. Thank you for being here today. So John Loxley, who is from the UK, he's also known as Ren Koi. We'll hear more about that. He's a DJ, a recovered alcoholic, and a published author. He hosts the Life in Recovery podcast, which aims to help people who suffer with mental issues and addictions and compulsive behaviors, which is pretty much all of us. He helps us to live a more holistically healthy life. He's the author of several books, but the book that I was given to take a look at is called All is One, The Science and Spirituality of Consciousness. And if you've been a part of this podcast in the past, I love talking about consciousness because that's really where it all is. So welcome, John.
Thank you very much, Carol. Nice to be here.
It's nice to have you. I want to, before we get into your story, just ask you a few rapid fire questions so that we can kind of briefly get to know you from a little personal standpoint. So let's start with this. Do you have any mantra or phrase or words that you would say guides your life?
Yeah, probably the biggest one would be keep it simple.
Keep it simple. Okay. All right. Do you want to say a few words about that?
I'm in recovery from addiction, and it's something that I learned through 12-step fellowships. But I just love the simplicity of it. Try and keep your life as simple as possible, and in any kind of circumstance, I'm always looking for kind of the simple path, the easiest option in terms of like what's going to cause me the least pain and the least friction.
That sounds like a really good philosophy. Is there a person in your life? Well, I'm sure there is. Can you name a person in your life who you would say was a particular inspiration for you or to you?
My wife's an inspiration to me, to be honest with you, especially recently over the last couple of years in terms of like the way she's followed her dreams, and she's kind of set up a new business, and she's doing an amazing job. And I've also got people ahead of me in recovery, like my sponsor, for example, that's been sober for coming up to 30 years, who's an inspiration, and also my own father as well, who's just celebrated 35 years sober. So yeah, they're the people that I kind of draw the most inspiration from, I think.
That's great. That's great, especially having your spouse be inspirational. I love that. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you. So let's get into your story. I know you're also called Ren Koi. I don't know the story behind that, but I'm interested in, you can tell your story of awakening to the divine, to spirit, and And I know it came through recovery. So why don't we just give this a spin?
Yeah, so I mean, in most cases of people kind of recovering from addiction or alcoholism or any kind of addiction, really, there tends to be a rock bottom that people hit at some point in their life. I hit that rock bottom at the age of 29 in 2009, and I woke up the morning after what proved to be my last drink, and I prayed to a God that I didn't believe in. I just got down on my knees. It seemed like the only option left for me, really. And I just said, I can't do this anymore, God, please help me. And I've never taken a drink ever since. So something happened. I knew that something had happened because I went from being hopelessly addicted to alcohol and obsessed with it, couldn't go a day without a drink. And when I did, when I didn't drink, I was in withdrawal and I was suffering with my mental health and my emotional health. And I said that prayer, and the next morning I went to bed that night and I had the best night's sleep I've ever had in my life. And I would always say that the reason for that was because it was like the war was over in my mind, it was like the decision had been made. As we say in recovery, I'd conceded to my innermost self that I was an alcoholic. And I woke up the next morning and the obsession for alcohol had been completely removed from me. And for the next month, I was in Thailand for a month, where historically I'd been before. And I'd been absolutely crazy when I was in Thailand, like it was just carnage in terms of drink and drugs and going off into the jungle with people and getting tattoos all over my body. It was just, crazy times. And I ended up in Thailand this time, and I had no desire to drink at all. It was just completely removed from me. There was alcohol all around me, and that set off my kind of journey, really, my spiritual journey. So I knew that something had happened, and then I later found that, for me, that, that I'd come to believe in a power greater than myself, that, I choose to call God today.
Do you remember what the prayer was when you hit rock bottom?
The prayer was, please help, please help.
Please help.
Please help.
Okay.
And I can't do this anymore. That's what I repeated that prayer a few times. Yeah.
Yeah. I think you said that, but I just wanted to get that myself. Okay. Please help. I can't do this anymore. So that is like that's a real honest surrender. Like, not just saying the words, you hit the bottom. I think these stories are so interesting. I talk to people all around the world, and often the spiritual awakening, not all the time, but often it takes some sort of rock bottom. Could be a health rock bottom, could be a relationship rock bottom, it could be an addiction rock bottom. And there's something about recognizing that I'm done and I'm insufficient, even though I'm an amazing, wonderful being. I can't do this by myself. I need to be in partnership with some higher power. I think that's interesting because my thought is that a lot of people who get into like 12-step, that there's a greater power is often a struggle for them. Is that true, or do I have that wrong?
Definitely got that right. I mean,
Okay.
I didn't actually go to my first 12-step meeting for another year after that prayer, because, as I mentioned right at the very beginning, my dad's in recovery, and my dad had already been sober for, I think, about 20 years at the time. And I was of the mind that my dad was weak to need support. Like I thought he's turned religious, he's weak to need this help from these people. So I was against the idea of going to any kind of support groups or anything like that. But unfortunately, although initially I felt wonderful when I first stopped drinking, obviously you do, because, my body very quickly repaired, and, my mind cleared, and I started to kind of enjoy life. But we call that the pink cloud in recovery, because people often have this experience where they feel wonderful initially for the first weeks, months. But then obviously life is life, and, the emotions start coming back, the thoughts start coming back, situations arise where it's difficult to deal with. And I found myself about a year later, suicidal. Well, I would say I was homicidal and suicidal, if I'm honest, because I just hated everybody. And, the anger was internal anger that I was projecting out on everybody else, but I just couldn't stand being around people and I couldn't stand myself. And, I'd not dealt with any of my issues at this point. And that was when I tried my first 12-step meeting. And the crazy thing about it was they kind of put into context what had happened to me in terms of my spiritual awakening. But the idea of God was a barrier for me at the beginning. Like, I didn't like the word God. I didn't like anything to do with religion. But when they explained to me that it was a spiritual program, that was okay at the time. And then I came to, over the years of my recovery, religion is not an issue at all for me.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's an interesting journey. So the idea that you saw your father as weak is very interesting. I think a lot of people who are atheists think that anybody who is religious or spiritual is weak, that we're or stupid.
Yeah.
I get both of those.
Yeah.
And yet it takes such strength, really, to get to that place where you're not going to kill yourself. You're not going to kill everybody that you hate, that you're actually saying, I surrender. And there's something about needing help that people have a hard time with, especially certain personality types. Like, if I ask for help, then I'm weak. But it's really just the opposite. It's really just the opposite. This idea that I think I can do it all myself is not coming from a place of strength. And so, partnering with the consciousness, the higher consciousness, I think does take strength in the material world that we live in. I also think it's interesting that you said that you were angry and that you hated everybody, because there's a lot of people out there like that now, don't you think? I mean, there always has been, but there seems to be a lot of anger in the world, and people who are just angry, and it reminds us, I think, to look beyond their behavior and know that there's a brokenness there, that person is projecting their anger and their disconnection from their self onto everybody else.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that anger stems from fear. I mean, I think that what I've come to kind of believe is that every negative emotion comes from fear, and every positive emotion comes from love, from God, and that's kind of like how I differentiate everything that's going on in my life, really. Like, if I'm feeling anything negative towards anybody, I look at what I'm fearful of, So anybody that's projecting anger towards me, I just think that person's probably in a lot of fear. And I think, if you look at, like, we won't get into politics of it, but, if you look at the political landscape in both our countries, there's so much anger, but everybody's just scared. That's what it really is. Everybody's just scared. They're scared for themselves, they're scared for their families, fear of the future, and that's, people that are scared are very easy to manipulate as well. So
I think that's the point. We don't have to get too much into this, but I think that's the point. Keep us divided, keep us afraid. We're very easy to control, very easy to manipulate, as long as we're not seeing that no matter what side you're on, there's something bigger behind all of it that wants us to be divided and afraid and hating each other. And when we act out that way, we're just feeding right into that system. I mean, that's my opinion. I don't know how you feel about the world, but I think the divisions are orchestrated to keep us really at each other's throat, and it makes us very easy to manipulate.
Absolutely. I mean, ego is the word that keeps jumping into my mind when you're talking about, these things. Like, it was my ego that prevented me from asking for help, and it's my ego that even to this day, like, my ego hasn't disappeared. Like, I still have one. The difference now is that I'm aware of it. I'm aware that I have an ego, whereas previous to recovery, I was my ego. Like, my ego was the character that I lived my life as. And now, if ever I slip into that kind of character, then I can see it, and I can pull myself back and recognize that. I think there's there's an internal battle going on with everybody. It's like you've got your spirit and you've got your ego, and the spirit is that pure spark of God, which, like when you're living your life from that pure spark of God, you are loving, you are giving, you are caring, you are kind. And, like I noticed that I am that person consistently when I'm with my daughter, for example, like my 5-year-old, who I love more than anything in the world. I can tell that everything that's directed towards her is from that place of love, but then every now and then when she's being really naughty, I'll slip into the ego, and I have to be careful that I don't get too angry and that I don't treat her in ways that I was treated when I was younger, and in ways that we do treat people when we're angry and when we're fearful, and it's just all ego based.
I want to get into spirituality and religion, but before we do that, I just want to ask about when you had this surrendering prayer and you slept really well, and then you lost your interest in all of the things that you had addiction towards. I'm really curious. You must have had a certain social circle. You must have had a certain group of friends that were still immersed in that addiction. And how was that for you? Did you completely change all of your social structure?
Well, I suppose I was lucky at that specific time that I had literally emigrated from the UK to Australia. So,
Okay.
and it was an indefinite thing. So I didn't know how long I was going to be there. As it happened, I only stayed for a year and then I came back to the UK. But when I moved back to the UK, I moved to London, and I hadn't previously lived in London. So for about probably a good 3 or 4 years, I had no real contact with the people that I was previously associated with. And I'm still friends with some of those people today. I mean, like one of my, my kind of drinking buddies, who was my best friend, was actually the best man at my wedding 3 years ago. So, and he's one of my best friends in the world. And I'm still friends with some of those people, but I don't spend loads of time with them. And when they go out drinking and stuff, like however they live their lives is up to them. But obviously I don't do, like the same things that they do all the time. Every now and then I'll go out to clubs and bars and pubs and stuff, but it's just not really that big a part of my life. And I had this constant battle again, because I was a DJ for years and I gave that up. Like I love DJing and I love music, but I gave that up because I wanted to walk this path of recovery. But now I'm 15 years sober, I'm starting to make music again, and like that's kind of becoming a part of my life again. And I can be a bit, not, I would say worried, but I have to be mindful of the reasons why I'm doing it. Because again, I don't want it to be an ego thing. I just want to do it because I enjoy it. I enjoy music and I enjoy DJing.
Yeah, soul expression. I asked the question because I do think that some people have a lot of difficulty when they make a big life change, that their social structure drags them back in, and it's really hard to either break away or to avoid going back. And
Yeah.
so I was just wondering how that was for you. Okay, let's dig into your book. Starts with, well, at least the second chapter, whatever, I think it was the second chapter. You distinguish spirituality and religion. And so I kind of want to talk about that. Well, I think you start with consciousness too, like what is consciousness? And you talk about the materialist who believe, I've talked about this in my podcast many times, that consciousness is something that the brain produces versus something that produces like the brain. So why don't we talk a little bit about your thoughts on consciousness and then your thoughts on spirituality and religion? And it sounds like you kind of came back to religion being okay. So let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so I mean, I wrote the book really to kind of explore my own thoughts on religion, spirituality, and consciousness. And during the research of the book, that shaped my kind of like final ideas really about what I believe. And they may change, but currently, like the panpsychist kind of viewpoint that consciousness is the kind of precursor to the material world is what I believe. So hence the title of the book, All Is One. I believe that the universe is essentially God experiencing itself. So everything in the universe is God. Like there isn't something outside of the universe that created the universe. The universe is God. And that may be completely wrong, but that's just kind of like the conclusion that I've come to based on, what physicists say and what the religions of the world say. And in terms of like spirituality versus religion, I always have felt that religions are an attempt to explain what's going on, essentially. So I don't think they're in any way kind of like negative or bad, but they get corrupted by humans, and that's where the problems arise. So for me, I just, again, keep it simple. I just try to keep it really, really simple. For me personally, I don't need a middleman to speak to God or to be in contact with God, because for me, God is readily available whenever I want to speak to him, her, it, whatever you want to say, the universe, etc. And I also believe that I am part of God as well, that God is within me. So I think that, I have a potential, like a divine potential, that it's my job to try to reach.
Yes.
And that's kind of like the meaning really of my life, is to kind of live a life of meaning, I suppose.
Yeah, and I think that's what the spiritual path is. I think that's what I was trying to say in the beginning. I mean, to me, it is how do we actualize the divine nature within us, like we are actively living as the higher consciousness, and not that any of us are there, but that we are in not pursuit, but we are constantly looking at, like you said, am I ego or am I spirit right now? Am I ego or spirit, or whatever your words are for it. So I think that I think one of the big messages of Jesus, whatever you think of him, I think was there is no middleman, that you have the kingdom within, and that it is at hand, and we don't need all of this stuff in order to be in the presence of God, that it is just a very personal thing. So I think that was his message, or at least one of them. And I also am very much aligned with you. I am curious, though, the question in all of my ministry, this question came up when I was leading a church. God is everything. God is all consciousness. God is all the physical and the non-physical and all of the universe. So then what do we do with evil?
Well, if you just look at it again, keep it really simple. If you just go back to the very, very bare basics, if you can take God right back to the very basic of light. So like, for light to exist, there had to be dark. It's impossible for the light to exist without the dark. So the yin and the yang, like all these symbols that we see across the millennia, they're all explaining that one basic truth. So God is essentially the light. God was the creative force behind the universe and is the universe. And God brought into creation all the matter that exists now. When it comes to the darkness and evil, that for me, like evil in itself, is a human thing. It's like, if I look at all the evil that exists in the world, it's created by humans, and it's created because of the ego, and that is my explanation for it. Because people might say, "Oh, like a lion killing a deer, for example, is evil." I don't see that as evil. I just see that as nature. Whereas a human being killing another human being is a choice, and that is evil, and that is like, and people will also use examples such as like illnesses, cancer, any illnesses, things like that. And my explanation for that again is, I don't think that any of these illnesses would ever even exist if we hadn't polluted the planet. So I think that all of these things that are what we class as evil are all a manifestation of the human condition.
Yeah, I spoke with a guest yesterday that we talked about illness also being really a product of sometimes it's ancestral trauma, sometimes it's our feelings that have been not processed, and they're impacting the body, and that there's multiple expressions of the body, the astral body and the physical body, and there's another body, I can't remember, ethereal body. But the idea that illness also is a manifestation of our disconnection, of our not living in alignment with oneness.
Yeah.
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 And so, everything that's out there is we're either in oneness consciousness or not, and most of the time we're not, because everything looks out there as separate. Everything looks separate from me, and so we have religions where God is separate from me, and God created this thing, and there's a separation. So I think we have a hard time with all is one being more than a concept. Like it's something in my mind. I get it. Now, how do I live it?
Yeah, and I think that so when people talk about having spiritual experiences, the key word is the experience.
Uh-huh.
I can't tell you, Carol, about my spiritual experiences and expect that you're going to agree with me, or that you're going to be able to imagine what it was like for those spiritual experiences. I mean, if you want, I would like to share a few of them, just because
Please do.
that obviously shaped massively how I feel the way and think the way I think at the moment. And two of them do actually involve Jesus, and one of them was kind of brought basically through a Buddhist meditation. So the first experience I had of this oneness was I started to practice meditation as part of the 12-step program, and immediately I started getting quite interesting results, let's say. And I went on a retreat. So I went on a meditation retreat, and I think it was for a couple of days. And basically what happened was my ego, as I see it now, my ego did dissolve completely for a couple of days. So I was living from that spirit. So I woke up in the morning and I just felt completely different. I felt like my entire body was vibrating at a different frequency. I had this, it was like my pilot light was just switched on, everything, I felt so full of love. It was unbelievable. And I was living in London at the time, and I was on the bus in the morning going to work, and I just felt glorious. And when I got off the bus, I was bent down, talking to people that were homeless on the streets, and, I felt complete and utter love for everybody. And this lasted for a couple of days. And during this time, I was thinking to myself, I'm enlightened. I am.
I've made it.
Yeah, I am the next Buddha. And I was trying to explain it to my girlfriend at the time, and my girlfriend, she just thought that I'd gone crazy. She was like, have you lost your mind? And just her saying that to me knocked it off. And the next morning, I woke up and it had gone completely, and I felt completely depressed. So, what goes up must come down. And I felt depressed for about 2 or 3 days, and then I kind of came back to normal. And I just had this realization of what had happened, really. So, it was activated through this meditation. So then I started to experiment with lots of different meditations, and one of them was a Christian meditation. And the only way I can explain it is just how it felt. So, I did this meditation. I was in my bedroom on my own, and I just felt Jesus stood behind me, and he put his hand on my shoulder. And it was so visceral that I actually turned around to see if there was somebody there, and obviously he wasn't there, but that was the experience, And then another experience I had was I was on holiday in Greece, and I was actually reading the Bible. I'd never read the Bible before, and I just wanted to understand it as best as I could. And I finished it, and I sat on the beach, and I said to my wife, well, I finished it now. And she said, well, what do you think? And I said, well, it all rests on whether I believe that Jesus rose after he was crucified. That is essentially, that is the point, isn't it? Do I have the faith that actually happened? And she said, oh, and do you? And I said, I don't know, to be honest with you. I said, the jury's still out. Anyway, I walked back from the beach to the hotel on my own, and I literally looked up at the sky, and I said a prayer out loud, and I said, okay, God, I said, if that really happened, give me a sign. And less than 30 seconds later, I heard somebody kind of running up behind me, and I turned around, and there was a gentleman who was jogging, on a run. And he was literally the typical depiction of Jesus Christ, the beards, the long flowing hair. And he ran straight past me and he said hello to me and then he carried on running. And it stopped me in my tracks. And I was like, that's just too simple kind of thing. And then I got back to the hotel and I was in the swimming pool leaning on the side of the swimming pool. And I'm just thinking to myself, like, this is just great. Like, that was such a crazy thing. Can't wait to tell my wife when she gets back. And then the same guy came running down the path, said hello to me again, and then ran off. And I never saw him again on the holiday. So I don't know who, who was this man? I have no idea. But God literally said, okay, there's a sign, and you can have it twice just for good measure.
Yeah, and some people would say, oh, that's just,
Coincidence.
Random, or coincidence. And I think it's really interesting. I've always felt that God is an experience. It's like you can read about God, you can learn about God, you can read the Bible, you can go to church and all that. But when people say God doesn't exist, it's like it's the experience. I mean, you either have an experience of the divine that, like you said, I can't explain mine and have it can make complete sense to you. And although I really liked yours, and they do make sense to me. But there's something so beyond the material when you have an experience, whether it's an experience like you described, or a near-death experience, or an immediate healing, or even a slow healing. So it's always baffled me that people are stuck on there is no God. Although I went through a time in my life where I believed that as well. and believed that religions were so destructive, and that it was belief in God and religion that was the problem of the world. And that's just a way I lived for a while, and then it didn't work. It just dissolved when you get on the path to try to pursue the holy within you, and start really having these experiences. Then it's like, okay,
Yeah, and it's a bizarre thing, isn't it? Because, like, essentially, to believe what we believe, that there is, a God in whatever shape or form you understand it. It's when you actually have these conversations, like, even in the back of my mind, I still think to myself, this is stupid. Like, this is crazy to think. It's crazy to believe this, but I can't not believe it because of my experiences. Like, those 3 experiences are just 3 of many. And the whole thing about coincidences, once I got sober and I started speaking to God and asking for signs, I had the most mind-blowing coincidences happen to me within a very, very short space of time that was so miraculous that I just couldn't, I just couldn't deny it anymore.
You can't deny it, yeah.
And then I went through a period, like you said, where I lost my faith and I was struggling, and and I went on holiday to Spain, and I went to an AA meeting, and I had another unbelievable coincidence where me and this guy sat in a room together. We'd never met each other before, and we were the only 2 at the meeting. And when he told his story, it turned out that he was in the shipping industry, and he'd been living on a ship with a guy called Martin who was from Canada, who had been stationed in Gran Canaria, where I had only been 6 months earlier on the same ship with the same man. So, like, when things like that happen, and you just, it's as Albert Einstein said, coincidence is God's way of remaining anonymous. Like these coincidences, they are literally they are the little sign, the little taps on the shoulder just to say, I know you don't understand it, but it's real.
Yeah. You don't have to believe, but here I am.
Yeah, and now
I'm
I've
back.
got. Yeah, and now the thing is as well is what I find also really interesting, and this is obviously like a big part of my journey at the moment is, now I've got a daughter who's coming up to 6 years old. I have never once talked to her about God, not once. I've never had a conversation with her about what I think God is. The only times it's ever come up is obviously she goes to school. So at school they do like a school nativity play, which they just did last week. And she mentions Jesus, and she'll say, "Oh, Jesus this and Jesus that." I don't even. If she did speak to me about it, I would have a conversation. But I don't talk to her about it because it's almost like I don't want to taint her future experiences. My mum and dad never once mentioned religion to me, ever. And the only experience that I had of religion was going to a Protestant church with one grandparent and a Catholic church with another grandparent. And that was it, and I really actually appreciated that as an adult, because I had no preconceived ideas. I had no negative feelings towards religion. I just didn't believe in God. I just thought it was stupid. So now as an adult, even to this day, I completely appreciate religion. I understand that it can be a wonderful thing for people, and it's it's great to have that kind of routine and structure in your life as well. So I'm comfortable with not discussing it too much with close family members and stuff, and just trying to live my life as an example. And then if anybody ever asks me oh, how come you're so calm with this, or how come you're not worried about this, that's when I'll say to them, well, God's got my back, and I totally believe that I'll be okay.
Yeah, I get that. It's interesting how you describe your upbringing. It's not dissimilar to mine. My family never mentioned God. I can't remember my family ever mentioning God, except every once in a while, my mom might say something like, if there's a God, we don't bother him because, we don't need to bother.
Which is true. He doesn't need bothering.
We don't need to bother with what we want. She's like, we're fine. I'm like, okay. So, but what that was is kind of like, you don't have to ask for help. It was kind of that. All right.
Yeah.
But the other thing is my mother literally, there were 5 kids, and she would take us on Sunday and drop us off at the Presbyterian church Sunday school. I think just so she could have an hour off.
Yeah. Just an hour of peace.
They didn't go to church. My parents didn't go to church, but they dropped us off at Sunday school.
That's good. I was just going to say, there was when people ask me now about my belief in God, and I have this obviously this relationship with my daughter now. So what I say to them is, I don't need my daughter's love and affection. I unconditionally love her, so it doesn't matter what she does. It doesn't matter how she behaves. It doesn't matter whether she comes to me with love and affection, whether she asks for my help or anything. I will just unconditionally love her for the rest of her life. If she does come to me for help and support and tell me that she loves me and talk to me, that's the greatest thing in the world. That's the biggest bonus. And that's how I see my relationship with God, is that it's up to me if I choose to have a relationship with him. And he loves it. He loves it if I do, but if I don't, he still loves me anyway. So it's just a decision whether I choose to or not.
Yeah, and I think when we are expressing unconditional love for our children, sometimes that's easy, sometimes that's hard. And then also expand that circle out. We expand it out to more family and our community and our nations and our world, and people we don't like. And the more we're able to expand that circle of unconditional love, the more we are fully expressing our God self, like we are being God here on this planet, the light. We are being the light. And I think that's largely what we're here to do, is to bring more light through us or as us.
That's what Jesus did, as far as I can, as far as I understand it. There's been these characters, across the ages. My belief when it comes to Jesus, my belief is that he definitely lived, and he definitely died, and he definitely rose again, and he was one of those characters that was just pure love, basically, and was there was no ego. But I also believe that there have been other characters across history that have been of the same kind of ilk, and so the bit that I believe that it's kind of probably a human construct, the actual story of Jesus, and that he was God incarnate. I just think that, well, he was, because we're all God incarnate, but
right.
I just think that he was somebody that attained that level of enlightenment, essentially. And I think that there have been other characters in history that have also done that as well.
Yeah, I'm a unity minister, and in unity, we would say that Jesus fully manifested the Christ, the God within. Like he was a full manifestation of that, and lived to show us that we can too. That, he said, all the things that I do, you can do and more. So it wasn't like I am this iconic being. A lot of people make him up to be that, like I'm special. But it's like guiding us towards incarnating the Christ within us, or the God within us, as well. And that's what we're called to do. And we miss the point by worshiping the person and not getting the message, and not actually being that. And I think that's what religions do sometimes. We just, back to ego. There's this need for power and control, and so we've got to create these structures, these hierarchical structures where we can control people. And so, we're going to, that's kind of what religions can or have ended up being over the past. We can experience a religion and not have the whole structure be what we're doing. But most people are taken in by the structure and the hierarchy, and this person is going to help me experience God or be forgiven or whatever. And none of that was what Jesus was about. The church was about people being in small groups and sharing and being the light.
I agree wholeheartedly with that. And I think if you look at these stories with a rational, an open mind, you can see that, cults were born. Like there's been many cults since, like Scientology and other cults that have arisen since, Jesus's time, where exactly the same thing has happened. They just corrupt a message and they create, they basically put somebody up on a pedestal. And my understanding is that Jesus never intended, like Jesus never wanted to be a church of in his name. Like you said, it was, his message was, you can all be like me, essentially. Like, just do what I do and you can be like me. And I love that, and I'd probably say that maybe further along the line in my life, I will probably gravitate more towards that message, and I try to practice those principles as best as I can in my life. But my guiding principles really is the 12-step program that I've incorporated into my life. So there isn't any other particular teachings that I'm following, but I'm completely open-minded to delving more into whether it's Christianity, Buddhism, etc. At any point in my life when I feel necessary. It's just at the moment I'm quite happy with myself as I am, and I feel like I help as many people as I can in my recovery and my at work, and I try and be the best family member that I can be as well.
That's great. To me, that's manifesting the Christ within you, and this is going to air after Christmas. It's going to air in the new year, but that's on my mind a lot. The birthing of the Christ and the whole story really being about, for me, it's really about birthing that within us, and that light that was in the story that was born in Bethlehem. It is a light within us, a consciousness light that is being born in us that we are paying attention to, or we're absolutely not. So it really depends on where you are on the journey.
I just wanted to say on that as well, actually, with the consciousness thing and the light, because you did mention it, and actually, like, there was a thought that came straight to me, because it's something that I think I definitely wrote about it in my other books, and I think I did mention it in All Is One. My experience is that as I strip away all the things that I'm addicted to, so when I say all the things I'm addicted to, what I mean by that is I will use any substance or any behaviour to change the way that I feel. So the alcohol was taken away from me, and the drugs, so I didn't do those anymore. But then over the years, things like eating sugar, over-exercising, sex, relationships, all these other things that were things that I could become addicted to in a behavioural way or physically. I had to battle all those things as well. And all my spiritual experiences have happened when I've been in a place where I've not been addicted to something. So I feel as though for that light to shine through, you have to strip away the addictions, and that's all wrapped up in the ego. So essentially, it's a process of ego deflation. And once you get to a place where your ego is deflated enough for the light to shine through, that is when you'll have these experiences and you'll experience the oneness, and you are coming from a place of consciousness, and you experience a lot of love at those times.
Well, I think all of us have addictions. They may or may not be alcohol and drugs, but certainly media, our cell phones, certainly social media, socially entertainment. These are things that they're wonderful things, and we've got to really be mindful of how much we're reaching for it. And why am I reaching for that right now? And what? Because I think all of it keeps us definitely from being present. All of it, every one of those addictions that you named and that I named keeps us from being present. And when we're not present, we really can't experience the divine, and we really can't experience what I'm feeling now. And perhaps that's why we keep reaching for sugar or the cell phone or whatever it is. But that's why in the beginning, when I said your mental health, you help people with mental health issues and addictions and compulsive behaviors, and that's pretty much all of us. Because I think we all have those, even though we're in denial about it because we've been trained that it's really just alcohol and drugs. Maybe
Yeah,
sex also. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. I would
Yeah.
agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah. But now, speaking of drugs, though, you had experience with ayahuasca and with some of the hallucinogenics. Is that right?
Psilocybin mushrooms as well. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I'd never done any of that in my addiction. Like I was always scared of psychedelics. So, I was offered mushrooms during that time, and I was offered LSD during that time, and I was actually like quite scared of it. And I just thought that's the type of thing that you do and you like lose your mind and you end up in a mental institute. So I just always stayed away from it. And then I was a few years into my recovery, probably, I think it was about 7 years into my recovery. And somebody had mentioned previously this idea of ayahuasca. And at the time, again, I was dead against it. I just kind of said like, that would be a relapse to take any drugs, and I just wouldn't even entertain it. But I actually started to research it for my first book, and the more I read into it, the more I became intrigued by the idea that it might actually help people to have a spiritual experience, which is essentially like the essential requirement for recovery. So this idea just wouldn't leave me, and eventually I booked a retreat in Mallorca, and I went and had one of the greatest experiences of my life. It was I think it was about a 12-hour experience, and I wrote a book about that as well called Together, an ayahuasca experience, and it was unbelievable. It was like having 10 years of psychotherapy in one evening, and it was, but the spiritual side of it, like because grandiose as I am, I went there, and one of my intentions was I wanted to meet God, and my experience of meeting God, under the influence of ayahuasca, was essentially like everything that I've ever read about nirvana. People going into the light and just losing themselves in the pure bliss. That was my experience of it. So when I came back from that place, and I was awake and aware, I was under no illusions. There was no doubt in my mind anymore that God definitely exists, and it shaped the rest of my life, really. And then after that, I did a couple of experiences with psilocybin mushrooms and had similar experiences. Nothing quite as profound, but just the oneness. I experienced the oneness again.
So I interviewed a guy who was a end of life physician, really interesting man. I mean, he was like a real doctor, but he ended up focusing his practice on end of life care, which is not where all the money is for doctors. But he talks about psilocybin as being something that he recommends for people who really fear death. Like this can help you overcome your fear of death, because so many people are just hanging on, and so many people are just so afraid of crossing that bridge. Does that jive at all with your experience with it?
I'd say that that was what I got from the ayahuasca experience, whereas
Okay.
the psilocybin experience was just a confirmation, really. You know, it was the
Okay.
ayahuasca experience was we are clearly going into the light when we die, and you know, the ego just disappears, and all that is left is the consciousness, and the consciousness goes back to where it came from. And then the psilocybin was kind of like an experience of like the oneness of nature and how we're just all, you know, like we're all just part of the material world, and it's part of us. And again, just like this oneness. So um, yeah, I mean, I've read a lot about near death experiences and people that have, you know, that have come back from being dead, and they have these unbelievable. And I just again, it's just like although I've never had that experience, I've had similar things where I can say, yeah, I get that.
So I've got a question for you. Having had these experiences, either the coincidences, what I mean by that is a quote coincidences,
Yeah.
or the full experiences of oneness consciousness, and then like that time you had it all day, and then your girlfriend popped you out of it. Do you feel like you want to kind of clamor back to that, like, oh, what happened? Like I've got to get that again, or is that something that just grounds your being and informs you for like as you go forward in your life?
Um, I'd say that the ayahuasca experience was so profound that I actually so the next day after I had that experience, we were offered another ceremony, and I drank the brew again, but I only had a little bit because straight away I knew I didn't need to do any more. It was like you've got all the answers that you need. And the same with psilocybin. I did the psilocybin the first time and had this massively profound experience. And then the second time I did it, it wasn't as profound. And I said to my friend, because I did it with the same person both times, and I said to him, I don't need to do this anymore. And ever since then, and that was in 2018, and ever since then, I haven't had any other experiences, but I've had numerous experiences of just the life coincidences, and well, I think I'm just God conscious now. I think that's just how I am in that place.
I love that. I love that phrase. I live God conscious. I live centered on God. I was asking because I do think there is an ego trap sometimes in this, oh, I want to have this experience again. Like that experience was just so great. I need to go have that experience again. I think that can happen in spiritual
Yeah,
experiences as
yeah,
well.
yeah.
Yeah. And it could be another addiction.
Yeah, well, I had another experience in between those two experiences where I went and did a Vipassana meditation retreat, which is a Buddhist
Mhm.
meditation. Um, and it was 10-day silent meditation, and I had numerous spiritual experiences during that as well. And again, that was one of those things where I was like, okay, I understand that this is real, and I would definitely do it again, but I'm not running back to do another retreat because the thing is, at the end of the day, you have these experiences, but you still got to live in the world. So it's like, it's not really, it's more about the integration of the experiences for me than it is about the experiences themselves. It's like, how do I incorporate this into my life so that I can live the best life I can and not live from my ego? And then if I get to a place, if in the future, let's say next year or in a couple of years' time, I find myself in a place where the ego has arisen again and I'm rampant, then it's going to be time to do something probably.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And you do have to watch the ego entrapping us in seeking the spiritual, because all we need to do, I think, really is have an experience, to know what truth is. I think it could be so clear that now I have clarity. I get it. And we've chosen to be in this physical realm, this 3D place called Earth, and we've chosen this for a reason. So we are not here to completely ignore the physical world and ignore the physical experience, but to integrate that spiritual into our physical. And then we're kind of like, see, I think that's what God wants. I think God is wanting to know itself through everything that is in creation.
Yeah.
And as become more and more self-aware, then there's like more God coming through.
Yeah, and I think that like for me, the word balance always comes into these conversations. It's like it's about like my life is very much about trying to balance I when I was a DJ and I was like very materialistic and like everything that I wanted was ego driven. I had to completely push that away and say, right, I'm not doing that anymore. And I had to push that away for a long time. And then I went down a path of spirituality. And in the true fashion, I was like addicted to spirituality. That's why I did my podcast. It's why I did all these, these retreats and et cetera, because I needed to know. I was like, okay, if that's not if materialism isn't the path and spirituality is the path, then how far down this path do I need to go? And now where I'm at in my life is I'm trying to do both. I'm trying to live what you'd call like I suppose a spiritual materialist, really, in the sense that I still want to have these experiences. I still want to do the things that I enjoy and, buy nice clothes and like have a nice car and live in a nice house. But at the same time, don't make that the total focus. Also be, as a running parallel, focused on trying to live a spiritual life and being a good person and helping others. So yeah, it's just trying to balance the two things. And I think that you can. I don't think that you have to be one or the other. I don't have to be like a monk living in a cave in the Himalayas. That's not my path, but at the same time, I definitely know that being rich and not caring about other people is definitely not the right path for me either.
Yeah, I think that's really well said because I think a lot of people think if you take the spiritual path, it leads you to asceticism. Is that the right word? Being ascetic, being, the monk in the cave. And I'm not that either, You got to do you.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got to do you. And I think that balance is a really good word to focus on, the spiritual and the material as we live in this material world. Yeah. All right, so I wanna quickly ask you where your name, Ren Koi, comes from,
Yep.
and then I want you to share whatever last words you have for my audience.
So Ren Koi was Ren means peace and Koi means love in Japanese. So it was like peace and love basically, which was a pseudonym that I used for my books because at the time when I started writing, I wanted to remain anonymous, like because the 12-step programs are anonymous. But then over the years, I just came to believe that I didn't really have to maintain my anonymity in that sense because I just think that it's that worldwide now that God forbid I should relapse or anything should happen to me. I don't think it's going to have a particularly detrimental effect on any of the 12-step fellowships, which was the reason why that kind of rule was in place in the first place. So that was the reason for the Ren Koi. And the one thing I haven't mentioned, which I would like to just quickly mention, as we're coming to the end, is that a huge part of my journey for the last 5 years has been I started doing jiu-jitsu, which is, for anybody that doesn't know, is a martial art that began in Japan and then the Brazilians kind of adopted it and now it's kind of a worldwide thing. And this hoodie that I'm wearing here, it says Everyday Manifest. So I'm part of a club called Manifest Jiu-Jitsu locally to where I live. And the reason why I mention it is because it's amazing for humbling my ego because going into to train and into competitions and to fight against people that like that are much better than I am. I mean, I'm 45 years old, and I wish I'd have started this when I was in my 20s. It's just a very humbling experience, and it's one of those things that it's really difficult to do. You always learn a lot in every session. The group of people that I've become friends with as a result of of doing jiu-jitsu, and especially my professor Johnny and his partner, they're just an amazing group of people, and it's just very complementary to my recovery. And I would highly recommend that anybody gives it a try. It might not be for you. My daughter's just started doing it as well within the last year, and she loves it, and she does kickboxing as well. And I just think that martial arts are amazing for routine, for discipline, and for humbling your ego. So it's never a bad thing.
Awesome. I love the path you've taken, and I think you've been really in tune with yourself and finding, what it is that really is leading you and directing you. And so thank you for sharing that. I also wanted to say I love that you opened by saying that your book, All Is One, was like an encapsulation of what you what did you say? Like what you believed about consciousness and spirituality. I just love the idea that you take on writing a book to just for the purpose of, I'm going to put down on paper what I think about all this and my experience about all this, because I think that's another thing to encourage everyone to do. Many of us have thoughts in our heads and we've had lots of experiences, but the fact that you actually took the time and have taken the time with other books as well to kind of encapsulate it and put it down on paper, here's what I think, here's my experiences. I think that's a great exercise for everyone to do.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, like when all my books that I've written have been an attempt for me to kind of explain things that I want explaining. Like, I'm trying to explain them to people so that I can understand them better.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Teachers always teach what they need to learn.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's really true. Just like counselors always work on the stuff they need to work on through other people. So, yeah, so good for you. Well, John, this has been really fun. I love talking about this stuff. So thanks for approaching me, and thanks for openly sharing your experiences. And I just really bless your journey. It sounds like you're just really living a meaningful and wonderful life, and your family's very lucky to have you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Yes, and thank you everyone for listening. And I now close the Spiritual Forum.